in which our protagonists, Anna and Levine, finally meet, and in which one of their tales comes to an end. Chapter 26. Never before had a quarrel lasted a whole day. This was the first time, and it was not a quarrel, it was an obvious admission of a complete cooling off. How could he look at her as he had when he came into the room to get the papers? Look at her, see that her heart was breaking with despair, and pass by silently with that calmly indifferent face. He had not simply cooled towards her, he hated her because he loved another woman. That was clear. And remembering all the cruel words he had said, Anna also invented the words he obviously had wished to say and might have said to her, and she grew more and more irritated. "I'm not holding you," he might have said. "You may go wherever you like. You probably did not want to divorce your husband so that you could go back to him. Go back then. If you need money, I will give it to you. How many rubles do you need?" All the cruelest words a coarse man could say, he said to her in her imagination, and she could not forgive him for them, as if he had actually said them to her. And wasn't it only yesterday that he swore he loved me? He, a truthful and honest man? Haven't I despaired uselessly many times before? She said to herself after that. All that day, except for the visit to Mrs. Wilson, which took 2 hours, Anna spent wondering whether everything was finished, or there was hope of reconciliation, and whether she ought to leave at once or see him one more time. She waited for him the whole day, and in the evening, going to her room and giving the order to tell him she had a headache, she thought, "If he comes in spite of what the maid says, it means he still loves me. If not, it means it's all over, and then I'll decide what to do." In the evening she heard the sound of his carriage stopping, his ring, his footsteps and conversation with the maid. He believed what he was told, did not want to find out any more, and went to his room. Therefore, it was all over. And death presented itself to her clearly and vividly as the only way to restore the love for her in his heart, to punish him and to be victorious in the struggle that the evil spirit lodged in her heart was waging with him. Now it made no difference whether they went to Vodvizenko or not, whether she got the divorce from her husband or not. None of it was necessary. The one thing necessary was to punish him. When she poured herself the usual dose of opium and thought that she had only to drink the whole bottle in order to die, it seemed so easy and simple to her that she again began to enjoy thinking how he would suffer, repent, and love her memory when it was too late. She lay in bed with her eyes open, looking at the molded cornice of the ceiling and the shadow of a screen extending over part of it in the light of one burnt-down candle, and she vividly pictured to herself what he would feel when she was no more, and had become only a memory for him. "How could I have said those cruel words to her?" he would say. "How could I have left the room without saying anything? But now she's no more. She's gone from us forever. She's there." Suddenly the shadow of the screen wavered, spread over the whole cornice, over the whole ceiling, Other shadows from the other side rushed to meet it. For a moment the shadows left, but then, with renewed swiftness, came over again, wavered, merged, and everything became dark. Death, she thought, and she was overcome with such terror that for a long time she could not understand where she was, and her trembling hands were unable to find a match and light another candle in place of the one that had burned down and gone out. No, anything only to live. I do love him. He does love me. It was and will be no more, she said, feeling tears of joy at the return of life running down her cheeks, and to save herself from her fear, she hastily went to him in the study. He was in the study, fast asleep. She went over to him and, lighting his face from above, looked at him for a long time. Now, when he was asleep, she loved him so much that, looking at him, she could not keep back tears of tenderness, but she knew that if he woke up, he would give her a cold look, conscious of his own rightness, and that before talking to him of her love, she would have to prove to him how guilty he was before her. And she went back to her room without waking him up, and, after a second dose of opium towards morning, fell into a heavy and complete sleep, in which she never lost awareness of herself. In the morning, a dreadful nightmare, which had come to her repeatedly even before her liaison with Vronsky, came to her again and woke her up. A little old muzhik with a disheveled beard was doing something, bent over some iron, muttering meaningless French words, and, as always in this nightmare, here lay its terror, she felt that this little muzhik paid no attention to her, but was doing this dreadful thing with iron over her. He was doing something dreadful over her, and she awoke in a cold sweat. When she got up, she recalled the previous day as in a fog. There was a quarrel. There was what had already happened several times. I said I had a headache and he didn't come in. Tomorrow we're leaving. I must see him and get ready for the departure, she said to herself. And learning that he was in his study, she went to him. As she passed through the drawing-room, she heard a vehicle stop by the entrance, and looking out the window, she saw a carriage with a young girl in a violet hat leaning out of it, and giving orders to the footman who was ringing at the door. After negotiations in the front hall, someone came upstairs, and Vronsky's steps were heard by the drawing-room. He was going downstairs with quick steps. Anna went to the window again. Now he came out on the steps without a hat and went up to the carriage. The young girl in the violet hat handed him a package. Vronsky, smiling, said something to her. The carriage drove off. He quickly ran back up the stairs. The fog that had covered everything in her soul suddenly cleared. Yesterday's feelings wrung her aching heart with a new pain. She could not understand now how she could have lowered herself so far as to spend a whole day with him in his house. She went into his study to announce her decision to him. That was Mademoiselle Sorokin and her daughter, calling by to bring me money and papers from Maman. I couldn't get them yesterday. How's your head? Better? He said calmly, not wishing to see or understand the gloomy and solemn expression on her face. She stood silently in the middle of the room, gazing fixedly at him. He glanced at her, frowned momentarily, and went on reading a letter. She turned and slowly started out of the room. He could still bring her back, but she reached the door. He remained silent, and only the rustle of the turning page was heard. Incidentally, he said, when she was already in the doorway, we're definitely going tomorrow, aren't we? You are, but I'm not, she said, turning to him. Anna, we can't live like this. You are, but I'm not, she repeated. This is becoming unbearable. You will regret that, she said, and walked out. Frightened by the desperate look with which these words were spoken, he jumped up and was about to run after her, but recollecting himself, sat down again, clenched his teeth tightly, and frowned. This improper, as he found it, threat of something irritated him. I've tried everything, he thought. The only thing left is to pay no attention. And he began getting ready to go to town and again to his mother's, whose signature he needed on the warrant. She heard the sound of his steps in the study and the dining room. He stopped by the drawing room, but he did not turn to her. He only gave orders to hand the stallion over to Voitov in his absence. Then she heard the carriage being brought, the door opening, him going out again. But now he was back in the front hall, and someone was running up the stairs. It was his valet running to fetch the gloves he had forgotten. She went to the window and saw him take the gloves without looking, touch the driver's back and say something to him. Then, without looking at the windows, he assumed his usual posture in the carriage, his legs crossed, and, pulling on a glove, disappeared around the corner. If you enjoy this format, please leave a like and subscribe and return tomorrow for the next chapter.